the outpost at Arion 3 had once been a symbol of hope, a fragile bridge between humanity and the Thal'Kan Dominion. After decades of border skirmishes, treaties, and uneasy truces, it had become a shared station, staffed by both human and Thal'Kan personnel. Diplomatic missions often described it as a miracle of cooperation. Yet, as the sun dipped below Arion's jagged horizon, casting long shadows over the alien desert, the outpost bore witness to a tragedy that would reignite an ancient fire. Captain Elara Kaine's boots clicked against the metallic floors of the outpost's central corridor. She'd arrived 3 weeks ago as part of the rotation to oversee the human presence. Though diplomatic by nature, her years as a soldier were evident in the confident stride and the scar bisecting her left eyebrow. The station had its challenges, but managing fragile egos and strained cooperation was something she'd handled countless times before. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Darren Voss, jogged to catch up with her. "Captain, you're going to want to see this," he said, his voice clipped. Elara raised an eyebrow. "Is it another complaint about food rations? Or has one of the Thal'Kan officers decided to redecorate again?" "It's worse than that," Darren said, his tone unnervingly serious. They rounded a corner and entered the observation chamber. Inside, a crowd of human officers stood frozen before the central display screen. On it was a live feed from one of the external cameras, showing the Thal'Kan side of the outpost. There, in the arid wasteland, a gruesome sight awaited, rows of human prisoners of war, their bodies limp and lifeless, strung up as if on display. Elara's stomach churned. She'd seen death before, she'd caused it, but this was something else. "Is this a joke? Some kind of propaganda stunt?" "No, ma'am," Darren said grimly. "That's live. It's been broadcasting on every Thal'Kan channel." The room buzzed with murmurs of disbelief and fury. One officer slammed his fist against the console. "They're taunting us. Mocking us." Elara took a deep breath, steadying herself. This wasn't just an atrocity, it was a deliberate provocation. The Thal'Kan had always been proud warriors, but until now, they'd followed the conventions of war. This display broke every treaty, every code of honor they claimed to hold sacred. "We need answers," Elara said, her voice cutting through the din. "Who are those prisoners? When were they captured?" "Some of them are from the Vanguard strike team we lost contact with 2 months ago," Darren said. "The rest, they might be civilians. Colonists from Sera 7. Elara's mind raced. The Vanguard team had been presumed dead, their fate uncertain after a skirmish near the Thal'Kan border. If the Thal'Kan had taken them alive, that meant they had been tortured and executed as part of this sick display. But why now? Why risk shattering the fragile peace? A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. A communication request blinked on the console, originating from the Thal'Kan delegation within the outpost. Elara exchanged a glance with Darren, then nodded. "Put it through." The screen shifted to reveal a Thal'Kan officer. General Korrath was an imposing figure, his dark green scales catching the dim light. His twin sets of amber eyes bore into Elara with a mix of disdain and amusement. He spoke in guttural tones, translated instantly by the station's AI. "Captain Kaine," Korrath began, his voice dripping with condescension. "I assume you've seen the consequences of human arrogance." Elara clenched her fists, but her expression remained neutral. "General Korrath, this is a direct violation of the Treaty of Alvarez. What you've done here is not only barbaric but a declaration of war." Korrath's jaw quirked, a gesture Elara recognized as a Thal'Kan smile. "Your treaties mean nothing to us. These humans trespassed into our sacred territory. They paid the price, as will any who dare defy the Dominion." Behind her, the officers bristled with rage. Elara held up a hand, silencing them. "You've crossed a line, General. Whatever grievances you have, this isn't the way to resolve them." "Grievances?" Korrath's voice rose, his eyes narrowing. "You speak of grievances while your fleets encroach on our borders, while your people strip our worlds of resources? This is justice, Captain. And if you wish to challenge it, your kind is welcome to try." The transmission cut off, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. "That bastard," Darren muttered. "We can't let this slide, Captain." Elara nodded, her jaw tight. "Get me high command. This isn't just about revenge, it's about survival. If the Thal'Kan think they can get away with this, they'll only escalate. We need to hit back, and hard." Hours later, the outpost became a hive of activity. The news of the executions had spread like wildfire, sparking outrage across human space. High Command's response was swift and decisive, a full-scale military operation to retaliate against the Thal'Kan Dominion. The peace was over. War was inevitable. Elara found herself in the command center, surrounded by holographic maps and tactical readouts. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation and anger. Even Darren, usually a voice of reason, seemed eager for vengeance. "We'll strike at their fleet station near Alvara," he said, pointing to a cluster of red markers on the map. "It's their most vulnerable position. If we hit them fast and hard, we can cripple their ability to respond." Elara studied the map, her mind weighing the risks. The Thal'Kan weren't fools. They would anticipate retaliation and fortify their positions. A direct assault could lead to heavy casualties, and the Empire couldn't afford to lose momentum so early in the conflict. "What about their supply lines?" she asked. "If we cut off their resources, we weaken their ability to fight without exposing our fleet to unnecessary risk." Darren frowned. "It's a safer option, but it doesn't send the same message. After what they did, we need to show them we won't back down." Elara sighed, running a hand through her short-cropped hair. "We'll propose both plans to High Command. Let them decide. But either way, we need to prepare for the worst." As the plans solidified, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that the Thal'Kan had more in mind than simple posturing. The executions were too calculated, too deliberate. They weren't just provoking a response, they were baiting humanity into a war. But why? What did they stand to gain? Her thoughts were interrupted by a message from High Command. The retaliation plan had been approved. Humanity's fleets were mobilizing, and the first battle of the new war was about to begin. Elara stood in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She thought of the lives that would be lost, the worlds that would be devastated. War was never clean, never simple. But after what she'd seen, she knew there was no other choice. As the engines of war roared to life, Elara whispered to herself, "They started this. But we'll finish it." The vastness of space seemed eerily silent as humanity's fleets mobilized. From the observation deck of the flagship Resolute, Captain Elara Kaine watched hundreds of warships come together in a massive formation. Their hulls gleamed in the distant starlight, each vessel brimming with the firepower and resolve of a species that had been pushed too far. Across the fleet, soldiers and officers steeled themselves for what was to come, their minds filled with images of the atrocity the Thal'Kan Dominion had inflicted. The retaliation plan had been set into motion. High Command had decided on a dual strategy. While one fleet would strike the Thal'Kan supply lines, Elara's task force would lead a direct assault on their staging ground near Alvara, a critical system for the Thal'Kan fleet. It was a bold move, one designed not just to cripple their resources but to send an unmistakable message. Humanity would not be cowed. Elara stood on the bridge of the Resolute, surrounded by the hum of activity. Officers relayed commands, tactical readouts glowed on the consoles, and the tension in the air was palpable. Lieutenant Darren Voss, her second-in-command, joined her at the central display. "Fleet is in position," he said. "Scouts report no major Thal'Kan reinforcements in the area. If we strike now, we might catch them off guard." Elara studied the holographic map, her fingers tracing the Thal'Kan formations. "If we're lucky," she muttered. "But I don't trust this. Korrath wanted us to retaliate. He's planning something." Darren frowned. "You think this is a trap?" "I think we're walking into one, but we don't have a choice," Elara said. "If we hesitate now, we lose the initiative. Whatever Korrath has planned, we need to be ready to adapt." "Understood," Darren said, though his jaw tightened with unease. Elara straightened and addressed the bridge crew. All ships, prepare to engage. Once we enter Alvara, there's no turning back. The fleet surged forward, their engines lighting up the void as they entered the jump. When they emerged in the Alvara system, the sight that greeted them was both heartening and unsettling. The Thal'Kan fleet was there, smaller than expected but perfectly arranged in a defensive formation. Dozens of sleek, triangular ships hovered in the orbit of a barren moon, their weapons trained on the human fleet. Status report, Elara ordered. Enemy fleet size confirmed at 50 ships, an officer replied. Outnumbered 2-1, but they're positioned to maximize their defensive capabilities. Elara's lips pressed into a thin line. It was too neat, too calculated. They want us to charge headfirst, she said. We won't give them the satisfaction. Darren nodded. Agreed. If we can force them to break formation, we'll have the advantage. Elara relayed her orders. The human fleet split into smaller groups, surrounding the Thal'Kan ships and launching a coordinated assault. Beam weapons lit up the darkness, streaks of light crisscrossing the battlefield. The Thal'Kan ships moved with terrifying precision, their weapons cutting through the human ranks with surgical strikes. As the battle raged, Elara's worst fears began to materialize. The Thal'Kan fleet was too prepared, their movements too deliberate. She could see it now, this wasn't just a defensive stand. It was a delaying tactic. Commander Voss, scan for additional signatures in the system, she barked. I want to know what they're hiding. Moments later, the officer at the sensor console called out, panic evident in his voice. Captain! We've got a second Thal'Kan fleet emerging from the moon's shadow. Size, 70 ships. Elara's stomach dropped. All ships, adjust positions. Defensive formation Delta, she commanded. The human fleet scrambled to reposition as the second wave of Thal'Kan ships joined the fray. Their weapons tore into the human vessels, overwhelming their shields and shattering their hulls. Explosions blossomed across the battlefield, sending debris spiraling into the void. Elara gripped the edge of the console, her mind racing. The Thal'Kan had outmaneuvered them, but there had to be a way to turn the tide. Lieutenant, what's the status of the supply line strike team? Darren checked the readouts. They've reported success. The Thal'Kan logistics network is in disarray, but it'll take time for the impact to reach us. Time we don't have, Elara muttered. The battle dragged on, each minute a brutal test of endurance. The Resolute shuddered as a Thal'Kan beam weapon struck its shields. On the bridge, Elara issued commands with the precision of a surgeon, directing the fleet to counterattack and regroup. But the losses were mounting. As the human fleet began to falter, a transmission came through on the main display. General Korrath appeared, his twin sets of amber eyes gleaming with triumph. Is this the best humanity has to offer? He sneered. Your fleets crumble like dry leaves. Your soldiers die screaming. Perhaps we were too generous in giving you this much of a fight. Elara's jaw clenched. Korrath, you've underestimated us before. I'd think you'd have learned by now. Korrath laughed, a guttural sound that sent a chill down the spine of everyone on the bridge. Underestimated? No, Captain. I have tested you, and you have failed. Your kind lacks the strength, the will to do what is necessary. You are not predators. You are prey. The transmission ended, leaving Elara seething with anger. But beneath the fury was a glimmer of realization. Korrath's arrogance was his weakness. He was toying with them, confident in his superiority. If she could exploit that. Darren, she said, a plan forming in her mind. How many ships do we have left with functional cloaking systems? 4, he replied. Barely. Good. Patch me through to those ships. A moment later, the captains of the remaining stealth vessels appeared on the console. Elara laid out her plan quickly, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. We're going to hit them where it hurts. Korrath's command ship is the linchpin of their formation. If we take it out, the rest of their fleet will falter. Use your cloaks to slip past their defenses and deliver a precision strike. The captains nodded, their expressions grim but determined. Understood, Captain. As the cloak ships moved into position, Elara turned her attention back to the main battle. She issued commands to draw the Thal'Kan forces away from their command ship, sacrificing what little remained of the fleet's cohesion to create an opening. The Resolute took another hit, sparks flying across the bridge. Shields down to 20%, a technician called out. Hold steady, Elara said, gripping the console. We just need to buy them a little more time. The cloak ships reached their target. Moving with surgical precision, they positioned themselves around the Thal'Kan command ship, a massive vessel bristling with weaponry. Using coordinated strikes, they disabled its shields and engines, leaving it vulnerable. Elara watched on the tactical display as the command ship's icon flickered and went dark. Moments later, the Thal'Kan fleet began to falter, their formations crumbling without centralized coordination. Human ships seized the opportunity, rallying for a final push. The Thal'Kan forces began to retreat, their remaining ships vanishing into the void. A cheer erupted on the Resolute's bridge, but Elara's expression remained somber. The cost of the battle had been devastating, and she knew this was only the beginning. Darren approached her, his face streaked with sweat and grime. We did it, Captain. We drove them back. For now, Elara said quietly. She looked out at the wreckage strewn across the battlefield, the remnants of both fleets drifting silently. But Korrath was right about one thing. This isn't about strength. It's about will. And we'll need all of it for what comes next. The aftermath of the battle in Alvaro was both a victory and a sobering reminder of the cost of war. The shattered remnants of humanity's fleet limped back to the staging grounds, their losses heavy but their resolve unbroken. The Thal'Kan had retreated, but it was clear they were far from defeated. Captain Elara Kaine knew the lull would not last long. Korrath would return, and next time, it would be with even greater ferocity. On board the Resolute, the mood was grim. Repairs were underway, the wounded were being tended to, and the fallen were being honored. Yet beneath the surface, a growing tension permeated the crew. Elara had seen it before, the quiet doubt that followed a bloody victory. She pushed it aside, focusing instead on preparing for the inevitable counterstrike. Lieutenant Darren Voss joined her in the war room, where the tactical display showed the updated positions of the Thal'Kan fleets. Reports from intelligence operatives painted a worrying picture. The Dominion's forces were regrouping at multiple points along the border, and their supply lines, though temporarily disrupted, were quickly being restored. We bought ourselves some time, Darren said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sure how much. Not enough, Elara replied, her eyes fixed on the display. Korrath isn't just regrouping, he's consolidating. He'll hit us harder next time, and we're not ready for that. So what's the plan? Elara leaned on the console, her mind racing. We need to take the fight to them. Strike before they're ready. But this time, we can't rely on brute force. We need a way to outthink them, disrupt their coordination. Darren frowned. Korrath's command ship was the key last time. You think they'll make the same mistake again? No, Elara said, shaking her head. They'll adapt, just like we are. Which means we need something they won't see coming. The answer came from an unlikely source. During the debriefing, one of the surviving cloak ship captains mentioned an unusual anomaly detected near the Thal'Kan retreat path. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it didn't match any known Thal'Kan signatures. Elara's interest was piqued. What kind of anomaly? Something biological, the captain said. It emitted energy like a power source, but the patterns were irregular. Almost like it was alive. Darren raised an eyebrow. A weapon? Or something they're hiding, Elara said. Either way, we need to find out. High Command was reluctant to divert resources, but Elara was persuasive. She argued that understanding Thal'Kan technology, or discovering something they feared, could turn the tide of the war. Permission was granted, and a small reconnaissance team was assembled. The journey to the anomaly's location took the team deep into uncharted space, far from established routes and far from safety. The Resolute led the way, accompanied by a few stealth frigates. The area was eerily quiet, the stars distant and cold. As they approached the anomaly, their instruments began to pick up strange readings. The energy signatures were faint but growing stronger, emanating from a cluster of massive asteroids. These weren't ordinary rocks, they were covered in strange, glowing patterns, pulsating like veins beneath the surface. "This isn't natural," Darren said, studying the readouts. "It's almost like the asteroids are alive." "Not alive," Elara corrected. "Engineered. The Thal'Kan must have built this, but why?" As the team drew closer, they detected a Thal'Kan presence. A small fleet of warships was stationed near the asteroids, patrolling the area. The humans cloaked their ships, slipping past the enemy unnoticed. The anomaly itself was breathtaking. At the center of the asteroid field was a massive, organic structure resembling a cocoon. It radiated energy in irregular pulses, lighting up the surrounding space. Elara stared at the display, a chill running down her spine. "What is that?" she asked. "Some kind of bioengineered construct," Darren said. "But it's emitting enough energy to power a fleet. Whatever it is, it's important to them." "We need to get closer," Elara said. "Scan it, figure out what they're hiding." The stealth frigates deployed probes, sending them into the asteroid field. The scans revealed something even more alarming. The cocoon wasn't just a structure, it was a weapon. Inside were dormant Thal'Kan warriors, encased in organic pods connected to the main construct. If activated, they could be unleashed as a devastating force. "It's a war cache," Elara realized. "A reserve force they've been hiding. If they activate it, they could overwhelm us." Darren nodded grimly. "We need to destroy it." "Not yet," Elara said. "If we blow it up now, they'll know we were here. We need to figure out how it works first. If we can disrupt their ability to activate it, we might be able to neutralize their advantage." The team worked quickly, analyzing the cocoon's systems while avoiding detection. They discovered that the construct was controlled by a central node, an organic core buried deep within the cocoon. If the core could be destroyed, the entire system would collapse. But as they prepared their strike, the Thal'Kan fleet began to mobilize. Patrols intensified, and their cloaking systems were pushed to their limits. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. Elara made the call. "We can't wait any longer. All ships, prepare for a coordinated strike on the core. We take it out and get out of here." The fleet moved into position, their weapons locked onto the cocoon. As the first shots fired, the Thal'Kan fleet reacted instantly. Alarms blared, and the patrols converged on the human ships. The battle that followed was chaotic and brutal. The asteroid field became a death trap, with ships weaving between the rocks as beams of energy lit up the darkness. The Resolute led the charge, its cannons tearing into the cocoon's outer shell. But the Thal'Kan were relentless. Their ships pressed the attack, forcing the humans to fight for every inch of ground. Elara directed her forces with precision, her commands cutting through the chaos. "Focus fire on the core," she shouted. "We need to finish this before they overwhelm us." Darren, manning one of the frigates, coordinated the final assault. The combined firepower of the human fleet broke through the cocoon's defenses, striking the central node. The structure shuddered, its glowing veins flickering erratically. "Core integrity at 30%, an officer called out. "Keep firing," Elara ordered. As the node collapsed, the cocoon began to implode. The energy within it spiraled out of control, creating a massive shockwave that tore through the asteroid field. The human ships barely escaped the blast, their engines pushed to the limit. The Thal'Kan fleet, caught in the shockwave, suffered heavy losses. The humans regrouped at a safe distance, battered but victorious. The cocoon was gone, its secrets destroyed along with it. Back aboard the Resolute, Elara and Darren reviewed the mission's outcome. They had struck a critical blow, but the victory felt hollow. The cocoon had been a glimpse into the Thal'Kan's capabilities, a reminder of how far they were willing to go. "This war isn't just about territory or resources," Elara said quietly. "It's about survival. For both sides." Darren nodded. But today, we proved something. We're not just prey. We can fight back. Elara stared out at the stars, her resolve hardening. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The Resolute returned to the staging grounds, battered but triumphant. The destruction of the Thal'Kan war cocoon had dealt a critical blow to their forces, but the victory had come at a cost. The crew's exhaustion was palpable, their faces lined with fatigue and grief for the lives lost during the operation. Captain Elara Kaine, however, had no time to rest. She knew the Thal'Kan would retaliate, and when they did, it would be devastating. In the war room, Elara stood before a holographic display showing updated intelligence. The Thal'Kan fleets were regrouping in multiple systems, consolidating their forces for a massive counteroffensive. Their tactics had shifted. Instead of relying on overwhelming firepower, they were focusing on hit-and-run assaults to weaken humanity's defenses. It was a war of attrition, and the Thal'Kan were masters of it. "We've rattled them," Lieutenant Darren Voss said, joining her at the console. "But they're adapting faster than we expected. If they launch a full-scale counterattack, we won't have the ships or the firepower to stop them." Elara nodded, her jaw tight. "Which means we need to end this before they can strike back. We need to take the fight to their core worlds." Darren frowned. "An invasion? That's suicide." "Not an invasion," Elara said, her eyes narrowing. "A decapitation strike. We take out Korrath and their leadership. Without him, the Thal'Kan forces will splinter." Darren crossed his arms. "And how do we get to their leadership without running headfirst into a trap?" Elara pulled up a schematic of the Thal'Kan capital world, a sprawling jungle planet fortified with orbital defenses and fleets. "We don't go through their defenses. We go around them. Intelligence reports indicate that Korrath's war council meets in an underground facility beneath the capital's surface. If we can infiltrate it, we can take him out and cripple their command structure." Darren stared at the display for a moment, then sighed. "It's a long shot. But if it works, it could end the war." The plan was audacious. A small, stealth-capable strike team would infiltrate the Thal'Kan capital while the fleet staged a diversionary assault on the planet's orbital defenses. Elara personally selected the operatives, a mix of seasoned veterans and specialists in infiltration. Darren insisted on joining the mission, despite Elara's protests. "You'll need me down there," he said firmly. "Besides, someone has to keep you from doing anything reckless." Elara smirked. "Reckless is the only way this mission works." The team departed aboard the Shadowspire, a sleek stealth frigate outfitted with advanced cloaking technology. As the rest of the fleet prepared for the diversionary assault, the Shadowspire slipped into Thal'Kan space undetected. The atmosphere aboard the ship was tense, the operatives silently checking their gear and rehearsing the plan. When they arrived at the Thal'Kan capital, the sight was awe-inspiring. The planet's surface glowed with bioluminescent vegetation, its sprawling cities blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. Orbiting the planet were massive warships, their weapons bristling in anticipation of the human fleet's arrival. "We're entering the atmosphere," the pilot announced. Cloaking systems holding steady. The Shadowspire descended into the planet's dense jungle, landing in a secluded area far from the Thal'Kan cities. The team disembarked, their boots sinking into the soft, glowing ground. The air was thick and humid, filled with the sounds of alien wildlife. "Stay sharp," Elara said, her voice low. "We've got a long way to go." The trek through the jungle was grueling. The team encountered numerous Thal'Kan patrols, each engagement a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Thal'Kan warriors moved with inhuman speed and precision, their knowledge of the terrain giving them an edge. But the humans relied on stealth and teamwork, avoiding direct confrontations whenever possible. As they approached the entrance to the underground facility, the team encountered their first major obstacle, a heavily guarded checkpoint. Dozens of Thal'Kan soldiers patrolled the area, their energy weapons casting eerie shadows on the jungle floor. "We'll never get through that without being seen," Darren muttered. Elara studied the scene, her mind racing. "We don't need to get through it. We just need to create a distraction." She gestured to a nearby thicket, where bioluminescent plants grew in dense clusters. Those plants are reactive. A controlled explosion should draw their attention away from the checkpoint. One of the operatives rigged a small explosive charge, setting it to detonate a safe distance from the checkpoint. When the charge went off, the plants erupted in a dazzling display of light and sound, drawing the Thal'Kan soldiers away from their posts. The team slipped through the checkpoint unnoticed, descending into the facility's subterranean tunnels. The facility was a labyrinth of biotechnological architecture, its walls pulsing with energy. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the faint glow of alien systems. Elara led the team through the twisting corridors, her pulse quickening as they neared their target. When they reached the War Council chamber, they found it heavily fortified. A massive door blocked their path, its surface covered in glowing runes that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. Elara signaled the team to halt. "Darren, you're up," she said. Darren approached the door, his suit's interface connecting to the Thal'Kan systems. As he worked to override the locks, the rest of the team took defensive positions, their weapons ready. "Almost there," Darren said, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just need a few more." A deafening roar cut him off. The team whirled around as a group of Thal'Kan warriors emerged from a side corridor, their weapons blazing. The humans returned fire, the confined space erupting into chaos. Elara fought with the precision of a soldier who had seen countless battles, her weapon cutting down one Thal'Kan after another. But the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. One by one, her team fell, their cries of pain echoing through the chamber. "Darren, hurry," she shouted, firing at an advancing warrior. The door's runes flickered, then dimmed as the locks disengaged. "Got it!" Darren yelled. "Move!" Elara ordered, covering the team's retreat into the chamber. Inside, they found the War Council in session. Korrath stood at the center of the room, his imposing figure radiating authority. Around him, Thal'Kan commanders turned in surprise, their hands reaching for weapons. Elara didn't hesitate. She raised her weapon and fired, the shot striking Korrath square in the chest. The Thal'Kan general staggered, his eyes blazing with fury as he fell. The room erupted into chaos. Elara and the remaining operatives fought fiercely, cutting down the Thal'Kan commanders one by one. But the cost was high. By the time the last enemy fell, only Elara and Darren remained, battered and bloodied. "We did it," Darren said, his voice shaky. "We took him out." Elara nodded, her breathing heavy. "But we're not out of this yet. Let's move." The escape was a blur of gunfire and explosions. The facility's alarms blared as Thal'Kan reinforcements poured in. Elara and Darren fought their way through the tunnels, their movements driven by sheer determination. When they finally emerged into the jungle, the Shadow Spire was waiting, its engines roaring. They boarded the ship just as the Thal'Kan forces closed in, the frigate's weapons firing to cover their retreat. As the Shadow Spire ascended into the atmosphere, Elara collapsed into a seat, her body trembling with exhaustion. Darren sat beside her, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "We just decapitated their leadership," he said. "Do you think it'll be enough?" Elara stared out the window at the receding planet. "It's a start. The rest is up to us." Back aboard the Resolute, the news of Korrath's death spread quickly. The Thal'Kan forces, now leaderless, began to fracture, their cohesion crumbling. Humanity seized the opportunity, launching a series of decisive strikes that turned the tide of the war. Elara stood on the bridge, watching as the stars drifted past. The cost had been immense, but the sacrifices had not been in vain. For the first time in decades, humanity had a chance not just to survive but to thrive. As the crew around her celebrated, Elara allowed herself a small smile. The war was far from over, but she knew they had taken the first steps toward victory.